The other thing that Ron talked about is the easy target label on this franchise. And he was talking about from the football side, the way it affects them. I think he made it clear, and we'll make it clear that he wasn't talking about, like, he wasn't minimizing the other stuff. But I think, like, I think for him, and it came up about because would players want to come here? And it was under that kind of theme. And I think because a lot of the attention has been on the off the field activities and the issues in Congress and all that, which is separate from them for on the field. What did you think? What did you make of all that?
Yeah, and I get where he's coming from on that, but you come into the situation, you want to fix it and move on and try to make things better. The reality is the fans of this team over the last 20 something years have been through a lot. And I think at some point you got to acknowledge that, accept that, but also try to move on. I think there's room for both here. But his point, I get, it's very, they always have like their reputation hanging over them. And a lot of the folks that help build this reputation aren't there anymore on the business side, and certainly not on the football side. But the reality is this: they've had 2 losing seasons under this regime.
Right.
They have 3 pending investigations and had a 4th end last year. They've had, so it's, you can't deny that. And while I'm sure it's frustrating to kind of build a better football product, while a lot of these pertain to, although the one with the DEA does not, a lot of these pertain to, past operations. That's the job he took on, and he knew this would be a challenge. I don't think he, expected some of these major ones that came up after.
Because when he took the job, not one of these things was there when he.
Yeah.
It was here when he took the job on was a couple decades of not success, right?
Right.
Everything else has happened there. And I think for him, it's like every time you start to feel like you move forward and then you take a step back, or you get pummeled, right? Like, he told me once, he told his wife that like right around the time the name changed, like said they announced it's going to be on February 2nd. He told Stephanie, you watch, something's going to come out like the next day or whatever. And then the next day was the roundtable session hearing. So again, I'm not even saying any of that's right or wrong, or it's not deserving of it. I just think from a football standpoint, they obviously want to move past that. Who doesn't? I think the fan base would like to move past that. The problem is there's some things that are still have to be dealt with. So that's still what's going to happen and for him, it's like, is winning. And again, nobody wants to minimize any of the stuff that's going on.
Right.
I mean, I certainly, I don't, I know you don't. But for him, it's like winning is the cure. How much from a football side perception, how much winning do they need to do to move past certain reputations or perceptions?
I know you mentioned a couple seasons, others have, kind of made their predictions. I think it's going to take longer than that. And the problem there, of course, is will this regime be afforded the patience even just to do that? Now, if you win, you're going to be retained longer, but there's still going to be some bumps in the road. And, even after a couple winning seasons, if you produce that, I mean, we're talking 20 plus years. This is a marquee franchise. This was, a multiple Super Bowl winner. I mean, there's a loyal fan base. Like, it has been eroded quite a bit over the last 2 decades. So it's going to take some time to build that back up. And I think it will take longer than a couple winning seasons. I think you start to build up hope after that point. But I think a lot of people have been disappointed when they have hope. So it requires more consistency. You're trying to dig yourself out of a pretty deep hole.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. And I think when you talk to people on the business side, you hear the word, they know they need to rebuild trust with the public, with the paying public. From a football side, everything, the hope and all that, it does comes in the wins and losses. Like, that's how you measure a franchise, right? It's how they won Super Bowls. They were a great franchise. And I agree. I think it's going to take, and I think they understand 1 year of a 10-win season, it's like, okay, that's great, or it's better, but what are you going to do next year? You've got to
Right.
follow that up. And the
Right.
way you create that success is by winning multiple years like that. Look at Buffalo a few years ago. What's the perception of Buffalo? Well, what is it now? Cincinnati 2 years ago, at this time last year, what's the perception of them? What is it now? Because now, like, oh my God, Joe Burrow, and like now they're winning. And so
Right.
you can do that, but it does take not just 9-8, 10-7, 10-7 playoff win,
Right.
or 10-7, get in there, exciting game. And like, if they had built off the Heineke game, the Tampa game, and you come back this year and you win 10 games, people are looking. Listen, at one point you wonder they might get to 9 wins because they were playing better. But if you go out, you've got to follow that up. If you get some momentum at the end of the year, you've got to follow it up to re-energize this fan base. And it's got to, make a playoff run, because it's since 2005, Nicki, no playoff wins. I mean, that's brutal. And this is a very proud fan base. And, you hear from people like they want to wear their Commanders gear. Still sounds funny or odd, but they want to wear just the name, but they want to wear the Commanders gear with some pride. And the only way they can do that is if, give me something to be proud about.
Right.
And
Right.
I think,
No, exactly.
so that, but I think that they understand that, because I've had conversations with people over there, I'm sure you have too, that you are paying for the sin, the football sins of the past.
Right.
You are
Right.
paying, like when you come here, you just got here, but like you said, the fan base has been here. So while you may say, why is everybody so impatient? The fan base can say, because the last 20 years,
Right.
that's why.
Right.
So and I think there's an understanding of that, because it has been more like, hey, we got to win. That's what those, right? So do you think there's more of a recognition of that?
I think so, because I think they understand the urgency. I mean, year 3 is a big year.
Yes.
And if they don't win this year, then I would imagine pretty much everybody is on the hot seat at that point. And there will have to be some pretty significant changes. But I also think it's more nuanced than that. Yes, it's the record, it's the simple wins and losses, but it's also, you look at what they accomplished in year 1, they seemed a very gritty team.
Right.
They produced one of the top defenses. The way they rallied late in the season, I think, was really remarkable. And to come out the way they did at the start of the second season was really disappointing.
Correct.
The defense statistically fell off. Now you could argue that it's not all about sacks, and we get that, but
they were horrible.
Yeah, I mean, that line was zero communication, it felt like at times. The secondary was all over the place. It's how do you have that significant drop off? You're supposed to build up. Oh boy, there go my dogs.
And your dogs are getting riled up about that too. They're ticked off about how they play.
It's
what they say?
unbelievable.
I can translate for people listening to your dogs. What the dogs are saying is they shouldn't have relied on 4-man pressure. Help Young and Sweat out by creating that pressure that you did after the fact, right?
Right.
That's what they said. I know it. I speak dog.
I had no idea. You're multilingual.
Yeah.
But that was the biggest disappointment, at least for me, just as a viewer, right?
Yes.
Like, you're gonna have some struggles in year 2. That's expected. You're still early in the rebuild, but to have that massive drop off, and that's supposed to be your strongest part.
That's a good point.
That's disappointing, and that's where you talk about hope and getting burned, and it's going to take time for people to really believe that it's going to turn a corner this time.
Well, and I think that's a great point about the hope, because it's you go back many years and there's always like, oh my gosh, you're bringing in this free agent class, there's the hope. Or you're bringing in Joe Gibbs, there's the hope. You're bringing in Mike Shanahan, you get McNabb, you get Griffin, you get all these things, and that hope doesn't last long enough. And this time the hope was, this is a top 10, top 5 defense.
Right.
And oh my God, Chase Young's going to redo this for the position. And I still think, I still solidly believe this defense can be really good.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
They had a really good stretch of the season.
Not to be.
Right. And I think Chase Young can still be very, very good. But that was the bubble burst at the end. If they had lost those games, but the defense is shutting them down and the offense isn't moving, it's like, well, it's kind of what you expected in a little bit.
Right.
But so,
I mean, people bring up the Russell Wilson thing a lot, why he didn't want to, maybe he didn't want to come to Washington. He turned that down and he chose Denver. You could compare the rosters, whatever. They had losing
or
seasons.
the proximity to LA and his wife want, so
Right.
there could be all sorts of reasons we don't know.
Right.
We don't know.
But, the fan base there, I mean, they have they had a sellout streak before the pandemic. That was years. It was the longest home sellout streak in the NFL. They have a 30-year something wait list for season tickets. They had losing seasons, but they had 5-6 losing seasons since Peyton Manning. So restoring that hope when another great quarterback comes in is not, I'm kind of speculating here, but I would imagine it's not that hard, not as hard as Washington, because it wasn't that long ago that they had a Super Bowl champion where they were in two Super Bowls in the span of 3 years. They've won with John Elway, they've won with Peyton Manning. They can win with Russell Wilson, perhaps. They have, they've done a lot and they've become more of a consistent winner in the past few decades. Whereas Washington, they haven't had that in years.
Right.
And they've had opportunities where it's, maybe now, nope, maybe now, nope. So it's going to take longer for them to really be convinced that it's going to change this time. So
and I think you see that with some players who Von Miller is not going to Buffalo a couple of years ago.
Right. Exactly.
That's a difference. Yeah. And so let's say the quarterback makes all that difference.
It
the Bills
really
have
does.
The Bills have a very good organization. Bean, McDermott, all that. But the quarterback makes the difference.
Yeah.
And that's where and see, your dog agrees with that.
Joey knows. Joey knows.
So you get that, and that's a definite byproduct. And that's why I think with Wentz, if he can become, it's hard to call him, as you said, maybe he's a bridge, maybe he's not, but he's getting him a bridge to somewhere. It may just be to get him to that 10-11 win mark, like Kansas City did with Alex Smith. And then you're really aggressive going after your version of Mahomes or whomever, right? If in a couple of years you feel like he's not getting us beyond, if they are thinking he's not getting us beyond this point, now we have to go do something else. But if you can get that 10, 11 win range, it gives you that, it starts to turn your reputation around. Hey everybody, it's John Keim. Do me a favor and hit that subscribe button, and I'll continue to bring you guests who provide excellent insight into the Washington Commanders. And while you're here, check out the other terrific content on the Ampire Media Network, including Inside the Cap with Joel Corey and All's Caps with Steve Wino and former Washington Capital Carl Alsner. Go ahead, hit that subscribe button. Thank you.